Section 73 of Commentary on the Epistles of Paul the Apostle to the Corinthians, Volume 1. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Commentary on the Epistles of Paul the Apostle to the Corinthians, Volume 1, by John Calvin. Translated by Rev. John Pringle. 1 Corinthians chapter 16, verses 8 to 12. But I will tarry at Ephesus until Pentecost, for a great door and effectual is opened unto me, and there are many adversaries. Now if Timotheus come, see that he may be with you without fear, for he worketh the work of the Lord, as I also do. Let no man therefore despise him, but conduct him forth in peace, that he may come unto me, for I look for him with the brethren. As touching our brother Apollos, I greatly desired him to come unto you with the brethren, but his will was not at all to come at this time, but he will come when he shall have convenient time. 8. I will remain. From this statement I have argued above that this epistle was sent from Ephesus rather than from Philippi. For the probability is, that the Apostle speaks of the place in which he was at the time, and not of a place, in going to which he would require to make a long circuit. And farther, in passing through Macedonia, it would have been necessary to leave Corinth when already in the neighborhood of it, and cross the sea in order to reach Ephesus. He accordingly tells them beforehand that he will remain at Ephesus until Pentecost, adding the reason, in order that they may wait for him the more patiently. Erasmus has preferred to render it, until the 50th day, influenced by frivolous conjectures rather than by any solid argument. He objects that there was as yet no day of Pentecost appointed among Christians, as it is now celebrated, and this I grant. He says that it ought not to be understood as referring to the Jewish solemnity, because in various instances he annuls and condemns the superstitious observance of days. Galatians 4 verse 10, Romans 14 verse 5, Colossians 2 verses 16 and 17. I do not concede to him, however, that Paul celebrated that day at Ephesus from being influenced by a superstitious regard to the day, but because there would be a larger assembly at that time, and he hoped that, in that way, an opportunity would be presented to him of propagating the gospel. Thus, when he was hastening forward to Jerusalem, he assigned as the reason of his haste that he might arrive there at Pentecost. Acts 20 verse 16. But while others presented themselves there for the purpose of sacrificing according to the ritual of the law, he himself had another object in view, that his ministry might be the more useful in proportion to the largeness of the attendance. It were, however, an excessively poor meaning to understand Paul here as simply specifying 50 days. Besides, when he expressly says, tin Pentecostin, the Pentecost, he cannot but be understood as speaking of a particular day. As to this festival, see Leviticus 23, verse 16. 9. For a great and effectual door is opened to me. He assigns two reasons for remaining for a longer time at Ephesus. First, because an opportunity is afforded him there of furthering the gospel; and secondly, because in consequence of the great number of adversaries that were there, his presence was particularly required. I shall do much good by prolonging my stay here for a little while, and were I absent, Satan would do much injury. In the first clause, he makes use of a metaphor that is quite in common use, when he employs the term door as meaning an opportunity. For the Lord opened up a way for him for the furtherance of the gospel. He calls this a great door, because he could gain many. He calls it effectual, inasmuch as the Lord blessed his labor, and rendered his doctrine effectual by the power of his Spirit. We see, then, how this holy man sought everywhere Christ's glory, and did not select a place with a view to his own convenience or his own pleasure, but simply looked to this, where he might do most good, and serve his Lord with most abundant fruit, and, in addition to this, he did not merely not shrink back from hardships, but presented himself of his own accord, where he saw that he would have to contend more keenly and with greater difficulty. For the reason why he remained was, that many adversaries were at hand, and the better equipped he was for enduring their assault, he required to be so much the better prepared, and the more resolute. 10. But if Timothy come. He speaks as if he were not as yet certain as to his coming. Now he charges them as to Timothy, so that he may be with them in safety, not as though he were in danger of his life among them, but because he would have enemies of Christ to oppose him. He wishes, therefore, that they should carefully take heed that no injury be done to him. He adds the reason, for he worketh the work of the Lord. Hence we infer that the Church of Christ ought to be concerned for the preservation of the lives of ministers. And assuredly it is reasonable that, in proportion as an individual is endowed with superior gifts for the edification of believers, and applies himself to it the more strenuously, his life ought to be so much dearer to us. The clause, as I also do, is made use of either to express his excellence, or simply to point out the similarity as to office, inasmuch as both labored in the word. 11. Let no man therefore despise him. Here we have a second charge, that they may not despise him, perhaps because he was as yet of a youthful age, which usually draws forth less respect. He wishes them, therefore, to take care that there be no hindrance in the way of this faithful minister of Christ being held in due esteem, unless perhaps it be that Paul reckoned this very thing to be an evidence of contempt, if they were not concerned, as it became them to be in reference to his life. This injunction, however, appears to include something farther, that they should not undervalue Timothy from ignorance of his worth. In the third place, he charges them to conduct him forward in peace, or in other words, safe from all harm, for peace here means safety. 12. As to our brother Apollos. He had succeeded Paul in the work of building up the Corinthians, and hence he has in previous passages ascribed to him the office of watering. 1 Corinthians 3 verse 6 and Acts 19 verse 1. He now states a reason why he does not come with the others, and he states the reason of this in order that the Corinthians may not suspect that he had been hindered by him. For the better he was known by them, they were so much the more favorably disposed towards him, and they would be the more ready to conjecture that matters had been designedly contrived that he should not go to them, in consequence of offense having been taken. They might, at least, be prepared to inquire among themselves, "Why has he sent these persons to us rather than Apollos?" He answers that it was not owing to him, inasmuch as he entreated him, but he promises that he will come as soon as he has opportunity. End of section 73.